Greetings, and thank you so much for being here and joining us today. My name is Dr. Kendra Washington-Bass, class of 1994 and proud chair of the Black Alumni of Notre Dame. Welcome to our series, Caring with Dignity. As a passionate Notre Dame alum, I've seen firsthand how to leverage the Notre Dame community, not only for networking and careers, which is fantastic, but I believe there is a unique responsibility and opportunity for us to support each other on a more personal and deeper level. In today's world, many in our Notre Dame community are navigating complex challenges of caregiving for aging parents, sick loved ones, and young ones. And these responsibilities bring emotional, financial, and spiritual pressures that require our collective support as well as practical advice. So, throughout this series, you will dive into the following. One, you'll hear from our donors around their caregiving stories. Two, there's an opportunity for you to hear about tips and strategies related to financial and legal issues. We'll explore some of these cultural considerations in caregiving decisions. We'll discuss what legacy means in our family history. And then finally, sharing those strategies and fostering an inclusive family caregiving experience. So on behalf of the Black Alumni of Notre Dame, we invite you to join us in the Caring with Dignity series. We hope that you find this series insightful, engaging, and that you follow along with us and think deep. Now, before we get started, I'd like to extend a sincere thanks to the Notre Dame Alumni Association and the Initiative on Race and Resilience for sponsoring this Caregiving with Dignity series. In our first session, we heard deeply personal stories from three incredible donors who all are navigating the challenges of caregiving. Lisa Marie, Francesca, and Ray shared their journeys with us, how they unexpectedly stepped into the role of caregiver, balancing the demands, family, and work, as well as their own lives. And we learned about the emotional toll caregiving takes on relationships as it shifts dynamics from parent and child to caregiver and dependent, and how essential it is to maintain respect for the independence of a loved one. Our guests highlighted the importance of open communication, especially with parents or loved ones who may not have been prepared for us to take on the practical aspect of caregiving, like their finances or even their medical care. We also touched on the financial burden, with Lisa Marie offering invaluable advice about understanding long-term care policies and planning for the future. Ray and Francesca shared practical tools like having a virtual assistant and involving other family members to lighten the load. Perhaps the most poignant takeaway was from our first discussion was the need for self-care. It became clear that without caregiving and carving up space for ourselves, caregivers risk losing their sense of self and ultimately their well-being. So today we are happy and proud to have a new partner, one of our donors who's going to share with us her relationship expertise, her psychotherapist expertise, as we dive into how caregivers can preserve their mental health, navigate the stresses and emotional challenges of caregiving, and strengthen relationships during this demanding time. Please help me welcome Danielle Duchatellier Boucree. Danielle, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I so appreciate that you're here. Now, Danielle, you are a 1991 graduate of the University of Notre Dame. Is that correct?
I am, yeah.
And could you share with us before we get started a little bit about your journey at Notre Dame and why you do what you do today?
Sure. So actually at Notre Dame, I was a business major. I used a very different side of my brain. And after graduation, I went ahead and I was in business for decades. But I was in marketing, and what I loved was people. like understanding why people bought what they bought. And that's why I was in marketing for so long. But after about 20 years in the business, I realized that I really wasn't following my passion. And it was time for me to be true to myself. So I went back to school and now I'm a psychotherapist, in which I really get to dig into how people feel and what they think. And the most rewarding thing may be a combination of my Notre Dame self and my professional self is that I get to really help people and hear their appreciation for the help and for the repair and for the help in their healing journeys. And that is so rewarding to me. It always has been.
Yeah, thank
A little
you.
bit of service, a little bit of professional.
And I think we all have a story to tell about the way that we find our purpose in life. And I just remember we were on campus for a short period of time together from 1990 to 91. And to see the legacies that we're leaving for those students who are here, knowing that going through an education experience is part of the journey. And what we're talking about now, as it's been 30 some odd years later, removed from graduating from the university, what happens along the way as we continue to mature, as we continue to think about our own legacies, but also what happens to those who supported us along our education journeys, our parents, our guardians, our loved ones. Some of us are married, we're caring for each other, we're caring for our parents and caring for our children. And this conversation is so apropos, especially today. Our families are living longer. And I'm so happy to be able to talk to you about teasing out some of the elements of the conversation that happened a few weeks ago with our donors. And so we wanted to get an expert in the field. And thank you again for being here. So I'm going to take out my pen because I want to write some notes as I think about caregiving of my own mom. I think about what this means for myself and my husband as our children will probably at some point care for us, or there could be something that happens in our lives that renders us limited in how we can care for ourselves, and then what happens next. So there's this idea around, are caregivers born? Are they made? What is the temperament of a person who's a caregiver? How does that happen?
Honestly, I don't think it's a specific temperament. I
Okay.
think it's a will, right? It requires patience for definite, a lot of patience. It requires us to stay mindful in what's going on today as opposed to what went on in the past or what is
Mhm.
to come in the future. A lot of resilience, compassion
Mm.
for this person who is changing every day and unfortunately on the decline, right? So we have to give them a lot of compassion and we have to be able to adapt with the changing stuff, the stuff that's happening day to day, whether it's health or thoughts or emotions, like things are changing and we have to be able to change with them. And then emotional regulation is really
Mm.
important, but in order to regulate your emotions, you actually have to be aware of them, right? So being honest, I tell people who come to work with me all the time, having a journal is a part of working through the stuff, right? Writing it down, not like a diary,
Right.
but more like a place to hold your feelings and your thoughts so that you can see them and work through them, right? And maneuver them, if you will, on paper. So that idea of being able to identify your emotions and regulate them is really important. And then strong communication skills, right? None of us are actually in this game alone.
Yes.
So being able to communicate how you're feeling and what you need are two really things that you cannot avoid when taking care of an aging parent or a sick person in your family.
Yeah, you just hit on a few things. I wrote down this idea of journaling, and I'm going to bring that to, I want to elevate that a bit because I follow you on LinkedIn. And as I followed you on LinkedIn, you were guiding us through journaling as a way of centering our feelings. And so I did that. And I'm not typically a journal writer, but I've learned to use some of the techniques you shared to formulate how I'm feeling and put words, whether they're
Yeah.
poetic words or I even bought this book called The Emotionary. It's words that are made up that you can't find like actual words for it. And I've been using that to
Yeah.
describe these mixed emotions. So that's the first thing. The
Oh,
second
I
thing,
love that.
yeah, emotionary, you have to look it up. The second thing that I heard you say was communication and sharing what you need. Now, I will use myself as a beta test here. I
Mhm.
am a doer. I will get it done, and I don't need nobody to help me. So, someone like me,
Okay, Kendra.
I know, and it's worked for me. It's worked for me in my work. But in this type of role, what does it
Yeah.
take? What would it take for someone like me to communicate a need for help when I am supporting a loved one, where I can just push back on you, Danielle, and say, I got it. I got it. Everything's fine. I got it.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think culturally,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
as a Black woman, right, this idea of wearing this cape and not seeing the cracks. So, share a little bit about how do we communicate that? What does that actually mean for people to communicate that need?
Yeah. So when we're taking care of aging parents or sick people in our lives, it comes with an organic level of stress,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when we're in that situation, when you literally said, "No, I'm
Yeah, I'm
fine,"
fine.
I was like, "Ugh." Like the hair stood up on the back of my neck. And because no one, really, people aren't. Fine isn't actually a feeling, right? It's a word, but it's not an adjective. It doesn't describe anything. And so I think in order to communicate and to get the help that you need, that first thing, and I hate to harp on it, people, clients and friends in general are always like, you and your feelings.
Go ahead.
Like, it is the most important thing to be able, if you Google feelings wheel, all these images
Yes.
come up,
Oh,
right?
yes.
There are ones for kids and there are ones for adults. And it allows you to pick a feelings word
Yeah.
until you really have a robust vocabulary yourself, right? To really identify how am I actually feeling? Because if you tell somebody, I'm fine, I need this, right? They're going to believe that you don't need it
Mm-hmm.
because you're saying, I'm fine. But if you say, listen, I'm feeling overwhelmed right now, could you please do this? First of all, they can validate your feeling. I'm so sorry that you feel overwhelmed. And that feels like you're not alone,
Yeah.
right? For somebody to validate your feelings. And then when you ask for what you need, they hear you.
Mm.
But if you go right in with, do this, do that, or sometimes when we carry that level of stress, we get critical, right? You're not doing enough. What are you doing? Like,
Yes.
why are you on that video game or whatever when I'm doing all these things,
Yeah.
right? So it allows us to focus on how we feel and what we need and not so much criticizing the other
Mm.
in front of us,
Yeah. Yeah. I
right?
hear you.
Because once you hit somebody with criticism, they're going to get defensive. You're never going to get what you want. You're heard,
Yeah. Yeah. So those feelings being
right?
cloaked in some other layers, I think. So, as I said, I'm using myself because that's most apropos at this moment
Yes.
to think about that conversation that I have with myself. Some of those are
Right.
cultural in nature about how to show strength. Some of those are baked into sort of the cultural norms of Americans or Western civilization as well. And then
Right.
those within my own community and sort of family dynamics. And speaking of family dynamics,
Yes.
I think as we talk about this potential shift in relationships with parents, especially if we're taking care of our parents, what about
Mhm.
relationships that are not as strong? So I have a very strong relationship with my mom. We complete each other's sentence. People just call me Mini Karen, right? And
Okay.
not so much a very strong relationship with my dad, who is ill. My father has leukemia, has been battling leukemia for many years. And this health crisis of his actually pulled me back into relationship with him. There is still tension. So, share a little
Yeah.
bit about your expertise, your advice or suggestions when that happens, or if there are relationships that are really fractured, but you have a parent or loved one that you may have to take care of. What happened?
Yeah. I think it's a little bit of a mind shift
Okay.
because this is actually an opportunity to connect sometimes, right? When you find out a parent is ill or they're aging and you realize they're on a decline, right? Life slows down because it has to,
Yeah.
right? Other things that were noise go away because you're focused in on this one thing. And that's a blessing,
Mm.
right? We as a society move a lot. We're constantly going from one thing to another. We've got goals, we're achieving things, we're doing all things, and that's wonderful. But when everything gets quiet, you actually get the opportunity to connect with other human beings. I think we learned that in COVID, actually,
Yes. Yes. We did.
right? Things got quiet, and suddenly we were playing board
I know.
games and we were doing things like,
Yeah.
and we were spending time watching movies with our families. Like we were doing the things,
Mm-hmm.
right? So to learn from that, it is an opportunity for parents that you're already close to, right? To learn more about them, to sit down and schedule quality time with them, just to sit and ask, help me understand this. What was this? I see you as a person who values education. Where does that come from?
Yeah.
To really try and get to know them. Now, for relationships that are more complicated and
Mm-hmm.
layered and have maybe a little bit of a darker history, it's not that different, right? We have an opportunity to sit down and ask questions, to get some of our feelings validated. Maybe there was a time in your life where you felt like your mom or your dad prioritized something other than you,
Mm.
right? And to understand where that came from, right? This is an opportunity for you to sit down and ask maybe some of the tougher questions, but tough questions don't have to be detrimental to a relationship.
Yeah.
I often say, I work with couples a lot, and they'll come in and they'll say, we have all this, we're constantly fighting, we're fighting all the time. And I was like, okay, I actually think conflict causes connection. It's an opportunity for connection. I don't think fighting is bad. You just have to learn how to do it properly
Mm-hmm.
and respectfully. But I think with conflict and discord actually comes connection and a greater love and appreciation for the other person. Just because a relationship was complicated growing up doesn't mean that the care at the end also has to be complicated. It can actually give you, the caretaker, a sense of fulfillment and joy, even sometimes,
Mm.
for having to heal what was maybe broken.
Yeah, I'm hearing, I wrote down as you were writing, like this idea of being in this vulnerable state for both the caregiver and the one who's being cared for. For thinking about how, I don't know if this is the right word, but this nakedness around this experience, right? With seeing each other in these raw spaces and how to turn those raw spaces into the blessings, into the opportunities that you just spoke
Yeah.
of. I don't think I've reconciled it that way in my head. I was just like, I just say, there's a reason why I'm being pulled back into this relationship with dad, right? There's something unfinished, whether it's a spiritual thing that I'm reconciling, but it is a vulnerability, right? He's hearing me speak about things. We're talking about how we love each other, which we rarely used to say because this moment requires us to say it because we don't know if we're going to see tomorrow. So all of these
Yeah.
things. And there is a educator, his name is Doc Brown, and he talks about this idea of people walking around with invisible backpacks. And it's the load we carry, and we just don't know what's inside the backpack. And what you were just describing, the opportunity to sit down across from mom, dad, or family members and ask the questions that we might have not had an opportunity to understand why, is unpacking that backpack.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So the follow up to what you just said has to do with this feeling that some people will get in terms of resenting being the
Hmm.
caregiver, if that's the right word. I don't know if that's the word, if it's guilt as well, but this idea of having to pause and stop our lives to take care of our, like, we didn't sign up for it. It's supposed to be the other way around, right? So how do
Yeah,
we
I know.
reconcile those feelings? And maybe it's connected to what you just talked about in terms of opportunities and blessings. So share a little bit more about that.
So resentment is a very common, typical feeling when it comes to caring for an aging parent or a sick person in the
Hmm.
family because it's unexpected,
Yeah.
right? Life was life and you were moving, and suddenly you have to like pause for this other person who a lot of times is very needy, strong, but they like demand
Yes.
quite a bit. And so your life is turned upside down. Resentment is completely normal.
Hmm.
And so I want to stress, again, sounding like a broken record, right? You have to, you can't ignore your feelings,
Yeah.
right? If you're feeling resentful, right, there's also a need associated with that, right? So whether it's you need help from siblings
Hmm.
because you can't carry the load by yourself, whether you feel like this person, this parent didn't really appreciate you and now they're needing something, like you have to get those feelings out. It starts on paper or in your head,
Hmm.
right, with the journaling, but then it ends with actually telling people how you're feeling, right? I want to go into this thing of, unless you're an only child, there are other people
Yeah,
who also share the set of parents,
that's right.
right? And so a lot of times the journey can be long. So as long as there's equity,
Hmm.
right, between the siblings, then it works. It's when it starts feeling inequitable or somebody expects equality
Uh-huh.
that it gets tricky. Because I may have a season in my life where my son is a second semester senior, and there are a lot of things.
Yep.
There are a lot of things I want to be present for, and I want to be there for him. And my sibling may be in a different stage of life where they don't have that, like that specific need. So for this 5, 6 months, I may
Hmm.
say, listen, I really want to be here for my son. Could you please take care of X,
Right.
right, for me during this time, right? We've got to share the load and make sure everything's covered,
Mhm.
and yet still that nobody feels like they're over sacrificing,
Yeah.
right? Or doing more than they can. So I think that's some of it too. There's a village
Yeah.
that you can lean on, right? And if you're feeling resentful, you're probably not using your village as much as you could, either from an emotional standpoint or a physical standpoint.
So let's pause for a second and hold on to the idea of the village, because that conjured up sort of cultural norms. And I want us to talk about, from your experience, particular cultural norms that either provide the support that you take care of your family, or some cultural norms where you don't. So I think about the following things that come to mind. Growing up, don't ever put grandma in a, I don't want to put them in a
Yep.
home, down to who cares for you, the foods that you eat. Caregiving in the cultural context can look and feel like a tug, a push and pull in today's society. My mother's don't put me in Shady Pines, right? She's thinking about Golden Girls and
Yes.
Miss Sophia. Don't put me in Shady Pines. He would rather be home. And some of the things that we thought about when my husband and I moved to Georgia from New York, the first thing we thought, now this is 2007. My mom, by the way, is 71. She's still going strong and she's doing well. Just had a second knee replacement, so she's ready to where them fans at. She ready for boots on the ground. Okay, but we thought make sure we have a bedroom on the first floor just in case
Yeah.
anything, whether it was us or my mom or his mom at the time. We didn't want to have to worry about stairs, and make sure there was a bathroom attached. So we thought
Right.
about those things. just good to have. Now that my mom is older, we're thinking even more, make sure like we can prove to how, because she said no shady pines. So,
Right.
again, in your experience, just holding on to this cultural idea of this village and caregivers, share, I don't know, your expertise or stories or testimonies around how do families of color have these conversations if there is a need for assisted living or memory care that can't happen in the home.
Yeah. First, I want to say respecting cultural norm is really important, right? But it's not important because it's the way things should be, right? The word should, I tell people just take it out of your vocabulary because who says? I have so many questions when somebody says, I should do this, but it's a choice, it's a preference, right? You said your mom has made this very clear that that's not her preference, right? So, so we're going to respect that. We're going to respect that to be able to give her all the things that she needs, not because she should have it, but because you want to be able to give that to her. And maybe you're blessed to be able to do that, right? So these are all choices. I struggle. I work with a lot of people of color, and there are a lot of like expectations around the last stage of life and who takes care of who and all of that. Those are good conversations to have early, right? Because if you can and want to, yes, do it, right? But if you can't, and then that's an honest conversation. That's a conversation that needs to happen, right? There is no right answer of how to do this. So it's like it's customized for you, right? I have a cousin who just lost her mom recently. And the first thing that she texted me was, everybody's got their opinions. People are making me feel so bad for the way I'm handling her last days, right? And by people, she meant our aunts, to be clear, like our family, right? It wasn't people on the street, it was everybody in the family. And I said, you don't have to pick up what they're putting down. You don't have to. You don't have to pick up judgment by other people who aren't living in your shoes because this journey is hard, right? And so you only do what you can do. And you also have to take care of yourself in the process, right? That nobody else is going to really step in and do that for you. So cultural norms deserve respect, but you got to take care of the person who's doing
Yes.
it.
How do you have that conversation? You said start early. What would that sound like? I don't know. Real play it with me. Talk with my own children, right? So I have a 23-year-old and 25-year-old, both sons. And what do we say? How
Yeah.
to open that conversation?
Yeah. That's a very vulnerable conversation.
I know.
So it has to include how you're feeling about it. Like they've got to lean in to understand why you want what you want, right? The list of
Hmm.
demands is just a blank list of words on paper unless they really understand where it's coming from, right? So the
Hmm.
conversation isn't about these are my like, this is the way it's going to go. The conversation is about this is what I'm afraid of. This is what I'm feeling about this next stage of life. Because we are getting a little closer. When you said
Yep.
earlier, like 30 years ago, I was like, it has been 30 plus
Yes.
years. Like it's this life thing is going by really quickly. So you've got to be able to have that vulnerable conversation, especially with your children.
Yeah.
This is a space that's safe. So it sounds like, I'm really afraid of getting older and or
Mm.
I'm really afraid of being sick. This runs in my family and I'm really afraid of these things. Like that's the seeds that start these conversations. This runs in our family and I'm really afraid. If you see this, please let me know. Those are the conversations that kind of engage them in your aging process. And then
Yeah.
when the times you say these are my preferences because I don't want
Hmm.
a stranger to
Right.
be the first person I see in the morning. So I prefer to be with family. It doesn't have to be you necessarily. I
Hmm.
prefer to be with people that love me. That kind of transparency will
Yeah.
become important. But it's not one conversation, it's a
Right.
series leading up to. as you see signs of yourself aging and you get more
Mhm,
afraid, sit down and have
mhm,
a
mhm.
conversation. This is the way that I'm thinking. This is the way I'm feeling.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
I think that guidance and advice gave is critical to maybe breaking some of the, I don't know if it's a taboo around talking about aging, talking about caregiving, talking about death and dying.
Or
My
even health, especially with our
right.
Black men.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yes, for sure. So a couple of things that come to mind. So my best friend had a series of losses in her life over the past 3 years. And her mother died unexpectedly. And it was devastating. And this is my bestie who I've known since we were 3 years old. And here's her mother's testimony, even in her death. When her mother passed, as she was getting things prepared and in that most vulnerable grieving space, her mother left this box in her closet. In the box was password, all her things. Her the plot where she had written some parts of she was writing a book, and so that became part of the obituary. Like she left the instructions for what to do in case something. That's that one piece. That actually spurred me and my husband to have the conversation with my mother and say, Mom, I know you're not ill at this point, but anything can happen. What do you want?
Yes.
So what you just said, what are your wishes? And we met with state attorney and, and got it. Like it was hard to do all the things she had to pull, but it's done. I know
Yeah.
exactly what my, and that is the first time in my family anyone has had a legal document around wishes. We've had wills and certain, but like wishes, what to do if they're unable to speak or talk or all of those. Where do the cats go? My mom has cats. Who gets the cats, right? Um,
Yes.
what happens to her assets or things of that nature, things
Yeah.
that take so many years later that pull families apart. I just thought, wow, such a tragedy. What a legacy blessing her mother left
Yes.
for
Yes.
us to learn. So tell me about what are some other teachable moments that happen in this journey of caregiving or of our families passing? What other examples can you think of that maybe we all need to know and learn?
I think the you mean during the aging process
During
itself? I mean, during
the
the
aging
caregiving
process?
itself?
Yeah.
What I love about the example you just gave is
Yeah.
that it removes so much anxiety
Mm,
around what, because as our aging parents get older and get closer to that time of transition,
yeah.
we start thinking about those things like financial impact and what are their wishes and what am I going to do? But then when they actually pass and we
Yeah.
start the actual grieving process, the first part of the grieving process is usually denial.
Yeah.
So we're in this space of numb. We're not feeling anything. We're just like existing and sometimes unable to function. But there's a whole lot of noise saying, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. And you're trying to
Oh,
make
yeah.
decisions, right? You're
Yeah.
trying to make decisions and you don't have the capacity to do. So that is not only a blessing and a gift to the caregiver to have those conversations and have everything planned out, but it also is respectful to the person who's actually aging or
Mm,
sick. So I love that. I think there's one thing that we have to be careful of is burnout, right?
yes.
Caregiver burnout, because it's a lot of work and suddenly you're exhausted, you're not sleeping well, you're not eating well because you're spending so much time and energy doing this thing and maybe
Mhm.
also trying to be parent, wife, and all the other roles,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it's too much. It's too much. And so it's important to, as soon as this process starts, to really focus on self-care and
Mhm.
self-love. So when I say journal, I say at the end, every journal entry with something that's positive, something you're grateful for, something that you're proud of, just to feed your soul. Because a lot of times journaling can be on the negative side. So it's important to keep that positivity and uplift yourself and surround yourself with people who also lift you up so you don't feel like this huge burden.
Yeah, so we talked a lot about the things that you do, right, in terms of caregiving for someone. And we talked about these emotions that are tied to them, this vulnerability, this idea of resentment, because this is unexpected, these opportunities that it can bring for families to reconnect in a different way. But let's talk about this well-being aspect, this tug and this push, right? Let me go back to I'm a doer, I'm an achiever, and I'm going to achieve the heck out of caregiving too. I'm going to do the darn thing.
I'm going to do the darn thing. Yeah.
I'm going to be the best caregiver ever. And at the same time, the sacrificing of care. It would be no good to both of us to be sitting, laying across from each other in the hospital room.
Yes.
So how do caregivers take care of those, and how do they get over the guilt of having a day off, the guilt behind expecting some piece of those? What do we do?
Yeah.
Because I can see that happening with me. I can see it.
Yeah. Yeah. Self-care is so broad and it's not the
Uh-huh.
same for everybody.
Okay.
There are some people, I met with a couple actually this morning who I was just like, I would love to tell you to go out on a date night, but really, I think I just need to tell you to take a nap, like together, take a nap because they were so exhausted with good reason, right?
Yeah.
So you got to take care of yourself the way you need to be taken care of, right? So whether that's you need somebody else to take care of you as you're taking care of this other person, that's completely legit, right? Oftentimes when we have kids, when we have our first baby, for example, right? The women will say, I will take care of the baby because I'm breastfeeding, I'm doing all the things,
Right.
but I just need someone to make sure that I'm taking care of me. So I need like an accountability partner to take care of
Uh-huh.
me. This is much the same, right? If you have a partner or a friend that can be that accountability partner for you to say, listen, you look really tired. Like, how much sleep are you getting? That kind of.
Mhm.
So surrounding yourself with people who can do that for you. But then you also have to create a new routine. We all live by some kind of routine. But when this happens and we start on this journey, that routine has to change. You cannot
Yeah.
keep the same routine and just add this on. So
Mm.
to incorporate things like the basics, make sure I'm eating. I have an eating
Yep.
schedule, make sure that I'm sleeping, and I have a bedtime routine, which
Mm.
means I'm off my phone. I'm maybe doing a meditation, I'm journaling, like I'm doing all the things to feed me and my soul so that I can sleep well,
Yeah.
right? And clear my mind, make sure I'm eating, sleeping, and moving.
Mm.
We've got to move. Can't just go from the desk office chair to the bedside chair, right? We've
Mhm.
got to move. We've got to get ourselves to help our brain function differently. We've got to move. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you have to be the first person and fastest person in the spin class, right? It just means go take a walk. Make it
Mhm.
a consistent part of your everyday. So those, when we think self-care, those are the first things that come to mind. Eat, sleep, move,
Yeah.
right? And
Gotcha. And one of the things you talked about was it's a new routine, and you said incorporate. I think the word integration, when people say I'm trying to look for balance, right? I no such thing as actual balance, right? It's this, even though we keep using that word, and my co-author, she uses integration, and she's like, how you fit this into this new normal that you're creating at this moment, because there are times where you have to give something up to do this, and then there's some of the pieces that you're going to have to pivot to here, but always keeping it in mind. You also have to fill your bucket, right? It's to put the mask on before helping others. Otherwise, you won't be able to do that.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Gotcha. That
Absolutely.
sounds, I mean, it makes logical sense.
Sounds so simple, right?
Sounds so simple, but when you're in the middle of it, when you're in the tornado, when it
Yes.
seems dark, right? When your parents, potentially those who are suffering from dementia, are forgetting who you are,
Mhm.
when there's agitation because they were so used to being dependent, they don't want their children to take them, right? There's pride, there is that's that vulnerability again.
Yeah.
For those who are taken care of, just even navigating that space, it's harder than what you describe. And so, what
Right.
else can caregivers do to keep faith or to manage that of tension? When if I see my mom and my mom forgets my name, or
Right. That's
I go to
hard.
hug her and she pushes away, or I just want to help her put a sweater on, she says no. And I'm
Right.
talking about aging, but there also could our children who we would love to see grow up, and maybe who is not going to grow up the same way I grew up. How, what else can I do to manage myself in that
Yeah.
space?
I just want to take a second to say for those listening who are dealing with parents with dementia or Alzheimer's
Yes.
or any of the things that is one of the hardest diseases because it takes away all of their agency, but so
Mm.
slowly.
Yeah.
It's you're constantly adjusting. And so I often tell my clients who are helping manage an aging parent with dementia or Alzheimer's is that first you have to educate yourself so you understand what's going on, right? It's it's easier to separate facts versus fears in your brain if you understand the facts. Anxiety comes from the fears of the future. So if you're grounded in this is what's happening, it's easier, never easy, but easier
Mm.
to push through some of those things that happen, not taking them personally, but understanding that this is the way the brain is now working. But it's even like more important that you have those people around you who can remind you of all the good things that you're doing despite the
Mm.
reaction that you're getting from your parent.
Yeah.
And remind you that you're all kinds of good enough
Mm.
and that you're doing the best and they can see it. Sometimes you need an external reinforcer
Yeah,
when you
that's the
can't do
village
anything
you're talking
yourself.
about. Yes. Yeah, the theme I keep hearing you say throughout this is idea of these multi-layered support. So as a caregiver, providing this level of love, compassionate support to my loved one. At the same time, I'm getting passionate support from either family members, friends, maybe it's medical professionals,
Yeah,
maybe it is joining a support group. This is a support group. We're building this conversation is another piece of support.
support,
Um,
sure.
and
Yeah, I
and how
often
to
say just that I hate to interrupt, but
no,
you
please do.
mentioned like support group and resources.
Yes.
And I often get the question, like, how do I know when I need a therapist? Or how do I
Mhm.
know when I need a different level of care? And so my first answer is always it doesn't hurt just to have that layer of support. So signing up for therapy or counseling or even a church group, it is just it's you're setting yourself up for success by having that level of support. It's not saying something's wrong with me today, but it's saying I know I'm headed for a really tough journey and I need
Mhm.
this. But if there's a point where the anxiety and sometimes depression, I can't get out of bed,
Yeah, yeah.
feelings start coming in, right? Then it's definitely time to seek a higher level of care than
Yeah.
just like a friend to talk to if you find yourself not being able to function like you did before.
Yeah. Uh, Thank you for actually bringing that in because there's this very complex and very nuanced. I'm also thinking about people who are in their own relationships with a spouse or a significant other who's not, it's not their immediate parent, but they're experiencing this along this journey, trying to maintain that relationship and at the same time work to support your parent or loved one who is experiencing an illness or aging. And so I want to also bring that, like the challenges of dating or maintaining a healthy spousal relationship this layer as well. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I think they're really two separate things, right? The
Mhm.
established partner is very
Yeah,
different from the dating, which is
sure.
very complicated. So let's start with the easier one. Let's the partner, right? Once you guys at some point said we are a team.
Yeah,
We're a team in parenting, we're a team in living, we're a team in preparing for retirement, we're a team in all the things. So in a healthy relationship, it is that's a lens with which from which you function.
hmm,
This is no different. So
right.
it's about talking about it early and often. This is what's happening. This is what I'm hearing. This is what I'm feeling. How are you feeling? And giving your partner space to say, if this is becoming too much, let's do something differently, because this is now, especially if you have children, your partner may see that it's impacting your children differently than you do because you're living in it. You're so much closer to it. So being able to work as a team with your partner is really important, and setting boundaries. I may
Yeah,
not be able to do X, Y, and Z anymore because now I'm dealing with this. Could you please do this? Again, I can't, like, just thinking of it as a team will naturally, like, it'll encourage things like conversations and strategies and tactics and plans together, so that it doesn't have to come in between, if you will, you and your partner. The other side, for those who are trying to date and find maybe a potential partner
yeah,
while they're going through this, it's possible.
yeah,
It's totally
yeah,
possible, because you are more than, this is something that you're going through. This
right.
does not define you. So you're still that lovely, bubbly person who's goal oriented and fun and all the things. You're still that person. You just are going through a really tough, challenging season. So to communicate that early is really important. So you don't have to hide it. It's not a piece of yourself that you have to hide. It's actually a piece that you need to put forward, because if you're dating somebody who can't understand and appreciate how you're showing up for your parent because this is what you want to do, maybe it's not your person. And it's
Mhm.
probably better to know that early. Your
Yeah.
values may be different. And
Mhm.
this is just an exhibition of that.
Yeah. So we've talked about a number of things, and there's three C's that came. Let me make sure I have my
Look
notes.
at you.
The
Yeah.
first, no, I'm a good listener. Uh, First was communication, needs, and also communicating emotions.
Yes.
Second was compassionate, right? Being compassionate with the person you're taking care of because of what they are experiencing, but also self compassion, being
Yes.
compassionate with who you are. And then the third C is community, these layers of support, whether they are expert support for much deeper and more personalized support around a therapist to really understand and unpack those feelings, and then these layers of support to help you with compassion and communicating your needs. I heard those
Yes.
three C's. So as
Uh-huh.
we just this, we can talk for about 10 more hours and it still wouldn't be
Yes.
enough. That's why this is a series, because we want to have different voice, different lived experiences and stories so that there's a rich conversation being had for those of us who are experiencing. We are the sandwich generation. We're taking care of
Yeah.
love our aging
Literally.
parents and our children.
Yes.
What would be some sort of lasting, for right now, lasting advice or words of wisdom you want to leave people as they continue on their journey or think about what this might mean for them in another stop journey of caregiving?
No matter where you are in the journey, one thing's for sure is that this is both an act of love
Mm,
and a profound challenge. It is not all good or all bad. You talked about community, and part of our
mm-hmm.
community are also our children being part of the
Yes.
sandwich generation. So there is actually things that our children can learn by watching the way we deal with this. They can also, not that it's not a cookie cutter thing, they're not going to learn
Right.
how we want to be treated, because that's may look very different from the way our parents wanted
Yeah.
to be treated. But it teaches them compassion and empathy, and it shows
Mm-hmm.
them like real time, and they can be involved. I encourage that, actually, in age appropriate ways. So if my child's learning to read, I may say, oh, why don't you go read to your grandmother?
Yeah.
So they probably shouldn't be like changing diapers, or not anything inappropriate, but to have them involved, as opposed to, I think a lot of people shield their kids from it because it's
Mm.
hard.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think there's much more positive to learn to take out of it. Same thing with us. I do think there's a lot more positive that we can take out of this journey, this part of our journey, than it's given
Mm-hmm.
credit for. A lot of people focus on how hard it is, and it is
Yeah.
hard. But at the same time, if you can, by the time your aging parent has transitioned, if you can say, wow, I know my parent a little bit better than I did before, I understand his or her journey more than I did before. Actually, I feel closer now than I
Mm-hmm.
did 6 months ago
Yeah.
to this person. And then maybe even after they've passed, live in their honor because you know them so much better. Right. So I think it's a gift. It is a gift to be able to do this.
I watched the journey of one of our no sisters. She posted the journey of her mom who was experiencing dementia. She eventually passed away recently. And one of the things she was posting was not just how her caregiving experience was going, but she was posting these moments of her mom. One of the things she posted was her mom's hands in her mom's hands. And she was like, I know it's very emotional. She said, but my mom's hands are my hands.
Yes.
And the honor, so when you talk about this act of love, that moment captured in a quick photo of these hands, her hands,
Yeah.
just left a legacy of act of love. And I would say not even profound challenge, profound compassion.
Yes.
So, Dan,
I love it.
thank you for this beautiful conversation. I
Thank
laugh
you.
because there's some bits and pieces of it that you can find joy, and to be able to find joy in the challenge, it shows there's something spiritual about that. And I appreciate you sharing your insights, your expertise. I'm so glad that you made the transition from business to psychotherapy, because that's such a logical jump. I
I
mean,
know,
who
right?
would have thought? But there is something about understanding how your emotions help you make decisions. So you're still tapping into the same. So we covered so much the gamut here, and this navigating of this emotional toll on caregiving. But I think this other layer you really elevated, again, this idea that this is an act of love within the profound challenge. And I think we can leverage this spiritual sense of caregiving in the most honorable way we can with our parents and with those who we're caring for. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you for
so much.
having me. Such a
This
pleasure.
was fantastic. So all of you who are listening, this is still another part of the season. I want to thank everyone tuning in. This has been an incredible series, and we will continue. We hope you found this extremely helpful, and we encourage you to continue following us along the way as we explore more aspects of caregiving. And we're also going to provide some further support and resources in upcoming sessions. Don't miss the next part of our Caregiving with Dignity series, where we'll dive into some more tips, some more strategies to help you along the way. And for more on caregiving with dignity, please visit us at think.nd.edu. So next time, see you soon and go Irish.